Welcome to the Success Story Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Cary. On this podcast, I have candid interviews with execs, celebrities, politicians, and other notable figures, all who have achieved success through both wins and losses, to learn more about their life, their ideas, and their insights. I sit down with leaders and mentors and unpack their story to help pass those lessons on to others through both experiences and tactical strategy for business professionals, entrepreneurs, and everyone in between. Without further ado, another episode of the Success Story Podcast. Thanks again for joining me today. I'm very excited to be sitting down with Sam Jaeger, who is a familiar face. You've seen him on television for over 15 years. He's been working on some of the most acclaimed and spoken about series on TV. Sam will be next seen in season 2 of Ryan Murphy's The Politician, starring opposite Judith Light, Bette Midler, Gwyneth Paltrow. He's a recurring star on Hulu's Emmy-nominated series, The Handmaid's Tale. He has also been a regular on this series and will be on a regular for the next season. He starred on Mark Cherry's CBS All Access Why Women Kill, and is probably best known for his role as Joel Graham in the beloved NBC series Parenthood. So an incredible career. Sam began his career in New York and immediately landed a supporting lead role in Steven Spielberg's Traffic upon moving to LA. Since then, he starred in films such as Clint Eastwood's American Sniper, Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice. He played lead roles in NBC's series Law and Order True Crime, the Menendez Murders, and ABC's miniseries When We Rise. And on the big screen, he will be next seen opposite Jessica Chastain in the Searchlight's The Eyes of Tammy Faye. So I really appreciate you sitting down. You've had a really, really incredible career. And I want to just, I did a summary, which is a boilerplate summary. It's not doing you justice at all. So thank you for joining. But I want to hear more, from you about your story.
Well, thanks. You covered it. You covered all the big points.
No, we're good. We'll call it. That's it.
That was it. Yeah. It's just been, I'd love to say it's just been one success after another, but it's, I like to say that my career is, one of the tools of my career is accepting rejection in all its forms and, in every myriad of ways. And, doing it as an actor where we're, innately more emotional and, sensitive than your average Joe. It's basically just going in for job interviews, hundreds and hundreds of job interviews, and getting one out of every, 20 of those interviews. So, the only success I've had is in persevering, and accepting when the job doesn't go my way and being thankful when it does.
I've heard this story a lot, and I've spoken to other people that have gone the creative route, whether or not it be an actor or somebody who wants to direct, produce, screenwriter. And the career path is not linear. It's not traditional. It's very difficult. So
Right.
help me understand, when you're young, when you are getting into this, how do you decide that this is what you want to do for the rest of your life?
Well, when I was 13, I think I saw Dead Poet Society, and I walked out of the movie theater and I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I had my two closest friends with me at the time, and one of them kind of scoffed at the idea, and the other one, who was my mentor, said, yeah, you will. And I just took that to heart. I listened to the one voice and not the other. And I moved out to New York in the middle of, also I will say, I had parents that, as fearful as they were about me doing this job, it was really my dad who, who was the one who said, to my mom, he's good at this, and let's just let him follow this path. And I think my dad was an attorney and a lawyer, and I think he said that he should have been a flautist. He played the flute beautifully and still does. But he went for the the stable job. And I think when it came time for me to decide what I wanted to do, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of telling stories, and thankfully, my parents just supported that. And I think that's the biggest part of having a young career is either trusting the people you love or just listening to the ones that that are telling you you can do this and ignoring the rest. So
And and I find that so the support is huge from parents for people that don't have, like maybe perhaps in a defined career path, it's a little bit makes a little bit more sense the steps you take. But the support is huge, but also the process. The process that you have to sort of figure out when you're starting this off is not so clear, at least from my perspective. So how do you start to figure out what the process is for finding the right people to work with, for deciding which types of roles you want to do, for understanding even like what things to learn so that you can be successful and exceptional at what you do?
yeah, uh, early on, I went to school for it. I studied acting, and at the same time, I learned early on that I didn't like the feeling of being an actor, which a lot of it is going into rooms with strangers and trying to impress them in 5 minutes, and I just it always made me uncomfortable. I'm not a showman. I don't like to be the center of attention. It's too much work.
It's ironic because you do it well.
Yeah, no, I chose the wrong career. But I like to, I really like telling stories at the end of the day. I was so moved by watching movies at a young age that I just saw them on screen back in Ohio and thought, that gets to me more than any other medium. And so I'm kind of a student of how best to tell a story, and a lot of my acting is kind of focused through that prism, which is um, hopefully, if you're telling a story in the right way, it's selfless. You remove yourself from your ego, so it's really about what the scene needs, what the character needs, but also what the story needs. And I think one of the traps of being an actor is we're so focused on what the character needs and how to get a job that we lose sight about what the director or what the story needs in that
Hmm.
moment, in that time. And because I do feel like stories are how we make sense uh, of chaos, and there's plenty of chaos right now,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
chaos of even just being alive, you know, that we are conscious beings on a planet that we have studied billions of miles away and not found one similar. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary, and it's only through stories that you know, that we're able to deduce, reason and purpose. I think so. I
I
find that very important, and acting is just one part of that.
No, it's just I think it's a really good point. The fact that you mentioned stories, I think stories are so powerful because they provide, like you mentioned, context to the human condition and what we go through on a day to day. And you mentioned something that actually just makes me pause for a second. You mentioned like the incredibleness of what the human condition is, and I don't want to get too heavy and too philosophical, but it's sad because we lose sight of what's really important a lot of the time, and there's so much stress and so much anger and so much hate that I think that
Yeah.
as you know as you focus on in acting, you focus on building a narrative that portrays selflessness. That is such a universal lesson that how many politicians, how many people that have this platform, if they just adopted that simple mindset,
Mm.
how much less stressed and I guess more, I don't know, more just what's the best word for this one? You're just everyone is just more on the same page and acting more selflessly as opposed to just trying to push a narrative as opposed to listening to others. I think that's I've seen
Right.
that a lot actually, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Scott, you mentioned, the anger um, and
Just
there's so much anger right now, especially. and confusion and yeah, honey. Hey, yeah.
Can I have cake?
Sure. Go ask Mom about it. Okay. And can you do me a? I think she's right in there. Just go in there and just yeah. She isn't. She's left us. I guess it's just the four of us now, huh? There she is. Hey, can you do me a favor, Calvin? Can you shut this door? Thank you.
I love
I'm surprised we made it this far without.
You know what?
Somebody asking for.
I think the distractions are the best part about everyone working from home now. I love it. I see kids. I see dogs. Yeah, it's real.
I bet you just get to see like, oh, now I understand who that person is.
It's more real.
Yeah.
We always, put up this like facade about like our lives and we have it all together and no one has their shit together. No, everyone's trying to just make it work and figure it out. And I think that work from home just sort of like highlighted that, it's really nice. And plus I don't have kids myself yet, but I work with a ton of people and, whether or not it's a kid or a dog or whatever, man, it just humanizes you. Just like, this is what it is. We're all just trying to figure it out.
Immediately.
Yeah. But I appreciate you.
Yeah. So
I didn't mean to take over you.
No. But I think, that anger, that sense of anger, and fear right now, we are along those lines, this big picture storytelling, we are, one of the reasons I don't like social media, is that, the negative is unfiltered and some nobody has to experience hurting someone in person, which is so much more vulnerable to do. And there's lessons to be learned, and people can go on the internet and hate all they want. And we as human beings are created to sense and search for things that we fear in order to remain safe. We hear a sound in the forest and assume it's a bear. And now that we have homes and, we're all much safer than we were.
Yeah.
We still have that same sense of fear when we hear something negative. It triggers those same parts of our brain that say, wow, there's something really dangerous here. So we pay much more attention to the negative. And, and so I think one of the things about storytelling is that if you tell a story in the right way, it relates a person's experience to someone else. And right now, especially, we're so removed from real understanding of one another. And I think politically, people on the furthest ends of the spectrum have such a hard time relating to the other because they are so scared of it and so fearful. And if we can tell a story that shines a light on that, and if the other side can receive it in a way that opens them up a little bit, then I think we've done our job as storytellers. That's a great it's a great good that we do if we can do it.
Like I said, I wish more people thought like that. Walk me through what you're doing with Common Canyon, because I think that that's something that's really relevant to our current environment where we're all stuck at home. I think it's a recent like it's from quarantine. You're doing this stuff right now, correct?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of an extension of it takes a lot for me to do anything on social media. And yet I thought, well, this is a way to show that what we're doing, this mundane, this day to day, this being trapped in our own homes, if we're able to, we can find some real beauty in it. It's more work. But the whole analogy is based on the first episode of this, that I went with my wife to see the Grand Canyon for the first time and looked out at it and thought, I need to change who I am. I've been living kind of this false life, and something with this massive expanse in the middle of a continent made me think that, and we don't have that opportunity right now. We're all stuck, and so the real trick is investing in a way to consistently go deeper and find beauty in our lives right now. And what's interesting is when I was going through it, I was actually having a really hard time finding the beauty in all this for myself. And so the video essays kind of became a way to make sense of it all, even for me, and also to share that with other people. So they're just really small, kind of like poems, but more essay on what this strange time is. 50 years from now, our people will ask us what it was like to be alive right now, and I wanted something to show them, especially these boys over here, because right now they just have no idea. They just think, that this is one long vacation with mom and dad home to answer any and all questions and refill whatever cereal bowls need refilling. And, so I kind of made it for them as well.
I have a question on something that I just have an idea formulating that I think is very interesting, because you work in film and television, and like for a living you portray other characters. That's quite literally your job. And I find it funny that, not funny, just interesting. Funny is the wrong word. That you are self-aware enough to understand of the negative impacts of social media, when there's so many people who, it seems like all they do is try and portray a different version of themselves on social media. It's like that's their escape. So how do we bring this to light? How do we enlighten people? How do we make them view social as a tool but not an escape? And it's a very tough question. I don't expect you to solve the problem, because a lot of underlying mental health things there. But I think that it's a big issue.
It is such a challenge. I mean, I think the hardest part is, I just think about, like, I'm supposed to, send some selfies for social media, or my team wants some, and I think I have about 12 in my phone. I mean, I just don't have. I don't have them. I'd rather take pictures of these boys, and I think the real danger is, well, first of all, admitting that we all have it. There's a need. I was thinking about, okay, well, I got to send some pictures. Well, what? Maybe I should make new pictures of myself. And where do I photograph in a place that is indicative of a nice surrounding that people would like to look at? And so we're always trying to. The hard part is, instead of living our lives through social media, we're constantly trying to filter out and manipulate where we are. And I feel like on social media, I end up thinking like a bad stand-up comedian, where everything is a bit. Where I sit with these boys, and instead of sitting with the boys and playing Legos, I'm thinking about how the Legos and being with these boys is funny and relevant to a larger audience. And
it's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it works for some people, but I always feel like it's not being honest to it. I have a responsibility to them, because I was a part of making them. So if I brought them in the world only for them to look at dad looking at his phone, it's kind of a slap in the face. And it's necessary for work to a degree, but I think it's important to separate, and I don't have any advice. I just think it's a constant check-in with yourself to say, am I doing the right thing with this?
A lot of that.
Everything takes work. Everything that in life worth doing involves some amount of work, So
do you find that just to bring it back to your career, and I appreciate that, and I also appreciate that you mentioned like there is no catch all, there's no universal advice on this because it's a very difficult topic, but it's also something that if you look at the anecdotal data from the various people that research this, there's a lot of issue with mental health. So I think it's something that if you can bring it up more often than not and just sort of highlight that point that there is an issue with it with today's society, even more so now that we're all stressed and we're all worst cases in most of our lives that we're living through right now. But
Yeah.
to tee that up and to tie it into to what matters to you and your career and your story, when you work in certain roles, how do you pick a role now versus when you first started? What are the
Mm.
things that you look for?
Well, hey, Colin, do you mind if I just want, honey, I just worry. Well, I think he can, but I just want him to, he'll be fine.
I don't care.
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure they can hear me. So if Gus is going to sing his songs, our son, our oldest son. Keep the door closed. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Our oldest son is way into like songs on video games, but it'll
Songs
just be
on video games?
Yeah. He'll be like, Dad, can we play the theme to like something on Roblox? I'll be like, I don't think it's available anywhere, buddy. I just don't. And then, but so he'll just end up humming it very loudly throughout whatever room he's in and throughout our house. So sorry, can you remind me?
Yeah, for sure. No, I was just asking because it's obvious you're very self-aware.
Right.
Just the path that we've taken in this conversation just shows how self-aware you are of what you put out into the world and even like what you're doing. I pulled up the like one of your videos over, and I was just watching it at the side of my eye, and it's just a very, like you mentioned, it's a very nice just like a profile about what we're dealing with right now, and it's just like a day in the life of literally you living through a day in a pandemic and the environment, and there's some footage of some people walking by a chevron with the masks on. It's just a very real piece of what we're doing and what we're living through. But I just meant to say it's obvious you're very self-aware, and it's a very big factor in your life. So I'm assuming that when you go into a role, as you sort of matured over your career, the things that you look for must be a little bit different than when you first started.
Yeah, they are. I just wanted people to like me for the first 10 years of doing this, I think. Or I wanted to get to the point where I would have one big hit, and then from that point on, I could call the shots. And that hasn't happened so much. But I'm able to say now, I like this and I can find the purpose in doing it. And it's usually, is it well written? Are the good people involved? Is it something I haven't done? And on a personal level, the things that I choose are, what good are we doing in the world? As lofty as that sounds, putting something out in the world that challenges people and gets them to look at things from a fresh perspective. That's hard to do. It's especially hard to do without trying to lecture or educate people, which is always a dangerous thing for a storyteller to do. Because the second you start doing that is the second people check out. And I'm also aware that, if I have something important for me to say, I don't think going on social media, I'm going to change anybody's mind. I don't think that's the way for me to do it. And so choosing the right role, or writing material that feels like an evolution of a conversation about what it means to be human, that's far more interesting to me. Also because I just think I'm I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel myself on social media. But I also feel like it's, people gravitate and like something that reiterates their worldview. So there's very few opportunities to find an inroad to a connecting point with people, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking for that in, The Handmaid's Tale is very a very good example of how there's a conversation about where we're headed, and there's a danger in there that kind of tragedy offers us some insights into where we are now. And I think that's a powerful tool, because it's not solely trying to preach and educate, but it is offering insights that are there if people just look a little bit deeper.
I think that I love speaking to people that play roles, because I think there's a superficial message that people get when they watch film or television, but when you really look deeper, there can be quite a bit that you can bring out from it. And I like speaking to people who actually are involved in these productions, because the themes and the messaging and the things that we have to look out for, we live through some of these things in real life, and then we try and escape to TV and film and whatnot to get away from our real life. But then we realize, like, there can be lessons learned from the arts that I think that we don't look too hard into if we just pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have learned more through Pixar films in the last 20 years than most any other films combined, and I think it's because they are very simple stories with some bittersweet elements to them that, I think it's very powerful, storytelling. And we were watching Inside Out last night, and it's very high concept, and yet, the kids enjoy it, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned about within that. Like you said, this one girl trying to escape her family because they want her to be happy, and she's trying to keep that up for everybody. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that, that they're trying to carry this burden of appearing. I saw my three of my closest friends the other night. We got together for very distanced beers in one of the backyards. And one of my friends was saying that he's in this relationship that he started with a woman in Mexico City. That she lives in Los Angeles, but she happens to be quarantined in Mexico City. And he spends an hour every day talking to her. He's never met her in person, and what he's realized is how much of his previous relationships he had this narrative going in his own mind that he never shared with his girlfriends at the time. And how interesting it was that here he's not physically in the same room as someone else, but he's closer to this person than he's been to any other in any other relationship for decades. And yet, we would assume that because people are in a room together that we're telling the same story we're sharing the same story. But he spent years just fabricating this hidden identity. I just think that's so fascinating.
I also think that the current environment that we're in is bringing out the good and the bad in people. I think because you're seeing, like, it's unfortunate. You see, like, these, like, abnormal amount of divorces and all these other things that are the side effect of being forced to spend time with the person who you were supposed to spend time with anyways. Which is it's sad, but it's a reality. And I think that this is, like, times are changing.
These are extreme circumstances, truly. Yeah. I mean, my wife and I have gone through everything. It took us 7 years to finally get married. And I used to say that we got all of our best fights out of the way. And so now the fights are just, it's not that they don't happen, they're just more efficient. It's like, wait, what the hell's your problem? All right, this is my problem. All right, I need 5 minutes. Okay, I'm sorry. And then we move on. And there's no, but, there's a lot of people that haven't, they haven't dealt with things until this, pandemic. And boy, when you're in the same room, and depending on how tiny the room is, you can only imagine the bigger the microscope is for all the things you never explored.
Yeah, it's a good testing ground.
Yeah.
Now,
one of the things I mentioned in the second Common Canyon is that, I do have a belief that we're going either deeper in or further out of any relationship. And it's so hard to go deeper right now, because you are just, especially I always need time to remove myself. We go to a party, and after 2.5 hours, I usually find a chance to go out to the backyard or down and take a walk, or just to get away, because of that many people I don't feel comfortable around, and I just need some respite. And we had to build that time in for ourselves, and it is like we do feel like are we going deeper in, or are we letting things slide? And it's relationships are under a microscope like never before.
Yeah, that's this got very heavy. I apologize.
we got deep, man.
Yeah, listen, I was not planning on going, but I'm happy. This is you're tuned into this stuff. You're hyper tuned into it, and I always appreciate a conversation with somebody that is very self-aware. That, above anything else, is probably my favorite personality trait. In all seriousness, because
I agree.
Yeah,
I'm always interested. I've spent a lot of time on sets and around meeting. With this job, you meet tons of new people, and I'm always fascinated by the alphas. But I'm always aware that I never want to be around them for much longer than 20 minutes, just because I can't. It's just too much work. I'd rather have, I married a woman who I consider the best listener I've ever known, and that is, I learned so much more from her than from anyone else, even after 20 years being together. And it's because she's invested in, and the way I watch her listen to other people, I learn enough just through that. She has no interest in surface. Whenever we go out to dinner with anybody, she'll always ask a question and wait. And you really get beneath it, you'll relate to this. Growing up in Ohio, similar weather to Toronto, and people can always talk about the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And we're guys, we always talk about sports, but my wife wants to know, and will ask a question that kind of gets to the heart of who someone is. And it's so refreshing. It's so much more interesting because we know what the weather's going to be generally.
Yeah. I think that another point that, it's like I'm trying to pull out lessons out of this conversation, and there's a lot. But being able to actually listen to people. I think I tweeted this the other day, just being able to listen to understand as opposed to listen to reply or listen to judge. And that's a quote from somebody, someone else, probably far more prolific than I am, but I just remember it from reading something somewhere. And I think that it's so important. And we don't do that. We just don't do that. And I don't know why. We're so quick to jump.
I think it is, Scott. I think it goes back to ego. I think we are either trying to reiterate our own worldview or trying to prove that someone else's worldview is lesser than ours in order to, just to justify where we are. And so it's a defense, I think. But if, man, I in studying my wife over here, the things that I've learned just watching her is the objective of the listener is to listen. It's not to solve. It's not to educate or entertain or pose an alternative. It is simply to listen, which is one of the hardest things. It's like meditation. It's like breathing. One simple task, and you're trying to filter out all these other things. But most of the time, that's just what people need. And the more space you give them to talk, the deeper you'll go with them. I One of my favorite stories of my wife, my buddy Jeff, childhood friend. I've known him since we were in church, and 7 years old maybe. And he lives out here in Los Angeles, and we would have him over because we're Ohio State Buckeye fans, and football day would come around, and they'd go out in the backyard at halftime, and Amber would clean up a little bit, and I went upstairs and I was listening to their conversation from the upstairs window, and I heard Jeff talking in a way that he's never talked with me. It's just deeper and more intimate, quieter. And I thought to myself, man, how does she do it? What is she doing? What is her secret? And at that moment, I heard her say, "How do you feel about that, Jeff?" And there was a long pause. And then I heard Jeff just go deeper into how he felt about something. I thought, that's it. Just investing in someone else, just for I think a lot of healing can happen, and especially needs to right now. If we just shut up and listen and give people the floor. I've had this interesting email chain going with the cast of The Handmaid's Tale, and I'm being kind of a newcomer to it. I'm a series regular this year. I'm honored to be involved in this conversation because it does involve race, and it involves some of the actors on our show who are finally saying, this is what I've noticed, that our show has been geared towards, an all white crew and a predominantly white cast, and there's an impetus even I have to want to share and say, yes, I'm, and I just thought, I haven't even responded yet. There's been about 20 correspondents, but I think my response is, yeah, I listen and I hear and I support all this that's going on. The danger is for me to try to prove that what I know is something else to advance that conversation when I'm still just gathering information, still just deciding what's valuable, what's important, and how we can move forward in a way that that brings us closer. So I think that's kind of what the essence of art for me is, just bringing us all in some way closer. All this technology was meant to do that, and it has in certain regards, and it's torn us apart in other regards. And I think it's always important to lean toward the former.
Agreed. Very well said. Whenever we started off with a little bit of your acting, and we just really went into things that actually matter, which I really appreciate. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I always like speaking about you, but this is you, and this is what you care about, and this is what we should all care about a little bit more. So I think that I'm happy that we went here. I like to, I think I should get your wife on next, because I think she has a lot of value too. From what it sounds like she could probably teach all of us a thing or two about how to be better people and how to listen better.
She's pretty amazing, truly.
Yeah.
She also she calls it, her friend deduced that she has something called misophonia, which is a condition where you can't like two sounds in the same room sound like a nightmare in your ears. And so I think she feels like she can physically only listen to one conversation. And it's very challenging as a mother, you can imagine, with 3 very bombastic voices in the house. But one-on-one, she's like built for this.
What I wanted to ask, just to tee it up, I always like asking some rapid fire insight questions about what your life lessons. But before I do a rapid fire, I wanted to just give you the floor. Was there anything that you're working on right now, or anything that you really care about that we didn't touch on?
Oh, sure. Well, the one thing I'm heading into now is I've been working on this film called Hate that was based off, kind of looking around the world, and I started writing it shortly after the Orlando shootings years back, and I started thinking, why are 15 of the 20 largest mass shootings in our country at the hands of white males between 18 and 55? And it seems like these are the last people on earth that should be upset with the way the world is, since it's been dominated by white men since the beginning of modern time. So I built this story around that concept about a man who's very lonely and isolated, and he's a security installation expert, and installs for an interracial couple, and then starts to spy on them. And it was, again, it's not my job to educate, but I did feel like it was a story that needed to be told, and I think it's not a in studying it, I realized all my favorite movies are the same movie. They're all film noir, which is usually some guy trying to save a woman that doesn't need saving, and this is very much that same story. I grew up with this belief that I need to save people, and that they are, that was my purpose. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of this bravado around, even white supremacy, this belief that, that these people find purpose in defending their worldview. And so the film is about that, in many ways. But it's a labor of love. It's something I'm doing mostly on my own, shooting and lighting and sound and editing, and it may destroy me, but it's fun to kind of get that off the ground. So we're hopefully going to start shooting that this summer into fall.
I have a feeling that it will definitely not destroy you, and you'll handle it just fine. You'll just learn a hell of a lot in the process. But
for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But no, it's very good. Okay. So
let's do it.
Sorry.
Are you going to rapid fire?
I'm going to rapid fire. One question I like to ask is one life lesson that you would tell your younger self.
Oh, younger self.
Mm-hmm. Probably a few.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't tell him anything. He's going to make the same mistakes, whatever I tell him.
Is there any life lesson you tell someone else who's a little bit more willing to and less hard-headed?
Marry your best friend. If you're going to marry somebody,
it's good advice.
Make sure it's someone you just absolutely adore.
It's very good advice. And the second question I wanted to ask was, it could be a book, a podcast, an Audible, a person, a resource. What's something that somebody should go check out that they can go learn from? Could be a video, could be a movie that particularly inspires you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many great things to learn from right now. I'm currently reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibrahim X, and it's it's an interesting book because it starts from a standpoint of him talking about being young and giving, or winning this orating award, but he had all these viewpoints that now he's entirely ashamed of. And I thought that that's a really interesting way to enter into this conversation about race right now. Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to being isolated, there's a book that I have always loved. It's still one of my favorites, that in this time of isolation is all the more meaningful. The name of the book is called Winesburg, Ohio, and it's was written in 1919 by Sherwood Anderson. And what's fascinating about it is it's just about this fictional town based on Sherwood Anderson's childhood town of Clyde, Ohio. But it's all about how these people in this quiet little town, at the beginning of the century, led all these sad, sordid lives. And yet each chapter reveals one different person in the town. It's a quiet book. It's a very simple book, but anybody can pick it up and relate to these stories in it. And it's incredibly insightful, especially now that we're all sequestered in our own homes. It's a nice, slow, rewarding read.
Very good. The latter for sure I've never heard of, so I'm gonna go check it out. So that's good. I like that. Those are good suggestions.
At the time I discovered it not in Ohio. I was out here. I went to the Hollywood Branch Library, and I sat in this place that I would write in every day, and I saw this wall that was like a curriculum for schools, and I thought, I'm gonna make this my purpose, to read all these books on this whole wall, because I'm sure the whole world is in this. Mm-hmm. And I started with A's, and so Sherwood Anderson was right at the top, and I was like, well, this is a great place to start.
That's probably the only way you're going to discover that as well.
That's right.
Yeah. Last question, probably the most important. Where do people go to get more about what you're working on, your social? Even if you don't like posting as much, you still have to have some so people can go connect with you.
I have an Instagram. I think it's Sam_Jaeger. You can see the Common Canyon videos there. And I think it's also available on Twitter. But and then Politician 2 season 2 is on Netflix right now. It's a fascinating, sensational season to watch.
That's all for today. Thanks again for joining me on another episode of the Success Story Podcast. You can download or stream this podcast wherever podcasts are available, including iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and many others. You can also watch this podcast on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, and peers. Please leave us a rating on iTunes. It takes about 30 seconds, as it allows other people to find our podcast and lets our amazing guests reach even more people with their message. And remember, any rating is fine as long as it contains 5 stars. I'm Scott Cary from the Success Story Podcast, signing off.